I'm here with Brandon, who is a gay Christian and a detransitioner, and he's going to talk about his story. So, welcome, Brandon. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm actually happy to be here.
Cool. Well, where would you like to start? Do you want to tell us about your upbringing and how
Sure.
you became a Christian?
Yeah. Let's see. So I was born here in Salem, Oregon, and moved around a few times over the years. But let's see. Um, I'm an only child, and my parents divorced when I was 2. And my mother, I stayed with her, and she remarried when I was 3. And that was a little bit of a difficult transition for me. He was let's just say, kind of abusive, and we'll just leave it at that. He and I have reconciled since, and he actually passed away a few years ago. And he came into my life when I got married to my wife, and made things right. He came and apologized, and he just really he manned up, and I was so healed by that. That was so healing to have him do that. It was wonderful. Um, so I grew up in Dallas, Oregon, from 75 to 85. So that was 10 years there. I was 13 when we moved. Uh, Mom and I left in 85 due to him and her and some of their marital stuff, and his kind of the abuse was getting more ramped up. As I became a teenager, I became more in his face and kind of challenging him, and it was, not good. So mom made the decision to move, and we left and went to Monmouth for a year. She was working in Independence all those years, for many years, and that was when things started changing for me. As far as I'm hitting puberty, and I've been hearing for the past few years, you know, people saying, "Oh, we're on a train going to California. Like, here, we have a pillow for your daughter's head." And, my mom's like, "That's not my a girl, that's my son." And then mom and I, 12, 13 years old, somewhere in there, we'd go into restaurants and they'd say, "Would you ladies like a seat?" And my mom would be like, "My son and I would like a seat. Thank you." And I started hearing these words in my head, you know, hmm, something's going on here. And I didn't like sports. I was a circuit boy. Was into electronics and programming basic computers, and a musician. I played piano and sang and wrote songs, but I didn't want to do any sports. I couldn't, and I had allergies, so I didn't get to go out in the spring and do a lot of stuff I wanted to do. And so I stayed inside quite a bit during the spring and played piano. And so I didn't really have a lot of those, I don't know, pseudo masculine, the stereotypical boy thing. Now I had a stepbrother and sister, and um, living with us for a few years there in Dallas, and that was good actually. Um, but anyway, like I said, we moved to Monmouth, and that's when I started noticing that I was not physically attracted to the girls when all the other guys were, and I actually felt like I'm more one of the girls. So, and people are affirming that by saying, "You look like a girl," or, "Oh, are you a female?" And I had that whole thing going on back then. You can't tell now, but there was definitely a time when I was, younger, so that I'd look that way. So I just made a decision one day. I said, if you can't beat them, join them. Basically, in a way, you know what, this girl thing, I'm getting attention. And so, not having a male role model in my life at that time, and even the one I had before that was more abusive. Um, I liked the attention that I was getting from older boys, teenagers, and so the older teenagers. And I'm 13 at the time, and I would start cross dressing, and I would start walking around the college over there. Um, Late at night, I'd just go out, you know, and um, I fooled a few people and I thought, wow, this is really powerful. I have a lot of power. I can trick people, I can fool them, and they think I'm a girl. And at the same time, I'm not being rejected. I'm not being called a sissy. I'm not, being looked at funny because they think I'm a girl. So this is great. So I thought. Um, we moved after that to Salem, and that's where I've landed. At that point, it was 1986 when I was 14. And this is the part of my testimony that I have never shared, as far as I know. And it's a little bit difficult. Um, I mean, I've talked about it in counseling, but I don't think I've shared it online before. Um, so we moved to Salem, and there was a neighbor kid my age that had found out I was new in the neighborhood and came over one day and said, "Hey, can Brandon come out and play or whatever?" And we were kids. He considered himself a kid still. He said, "Play." It was kind of funny. I was thinking, man, we're teenagers. We don't talk like that anymore. And I met him and we started hanging out. And one day I told him, I said, "Look, I have a secret. I'm secretly a girl." Yep. I told him that. I said, "Yeah, my mother wanted a boy, so she's been dressing me up like one. So that's why we have to make this a secret." And we became boyfriend, girlfriend, so he thought, for about a year. That was interesting. And yes, we were sexually active, but I had to be obviously very careful. You have to hide things. You only wear certain clothes. I mean, I got really, really good at this masquerade. It was totally unfair to him, and I regret it. I regret the way it went down. It should never have been handled that way. I should never have tried to trick somebody. And that could have been detrimental to my own physical health. Back in those days, people didn't come out, and if someone found out about you, you'd more than likely get beat up. You would get physically assaulted back in the 80s. Um, if you're in high school or junior high and the kids found out, it was not a pretty sight. Um, so after that year, he moved on, and I had about a year where I wasn't sure what I was going to do when I was 15. And that was the year my mom took me to counseling. She knew something was up because the police had picked me up down at the park downtown in Salem because I was cross dressing. And it was during school day, and they thought this is a kid that belongs in school. And they sent the police, and the police went, "Oh, wait a minute, something's not right here." So they called my mom. I take the bus home. She comes home. She spends the next several hours not saying a word to me, just looking completely disgusted and terrified. And so immediately after that, I go to therapy. So I'm seeing this counselor for the first time in my life, and he starts holding up those flashcards. You say butterfly, and they're the white cards with the black blobs, and they were obviously they were dual gender cards as far as their drawing, and you could tell. So I just kept saying butterfly, butterfly. I couldn't concentrate, and I sure as heck wasn't about to talk about this because I was too scared. I wasn't going to be honest with him. And the really sad part was that even at 14, I'm looking at this guy going, "Wow, he's really attractive. This is not helping." So that didn't go well. And we finally quit doing that. And I ended up going to Christian school. Finally, I had been bouncing around from school to school because I had so many emotional problems and the severest ADHD, probably on the autism spectrum back then. We just didn't know. And I had been bounced everywhere. I was out of options for schools. But Salem Academy took me, which was good. I mean, they probably wanted that $2,800 a year, which seems cheap now, but that was pretty expensive back in 1988. So I spent a year at Salem Academy and started doing really well. I started doing really well with interacting with people. Um, the gay stuff, the transgender stuff sort of got buried. And I started focusing on school and relationships and spending time with my cousin who was going to school. We used to ride together in the car, and it was good. Um, then I got into a fight, got beat up pretty good one day at school, and I never went back, and I was done. I dropped out. Um, and after I dropped out, I went to work. I was doing fast food, and I had this hobby back in those days of we talked on the CB radio because we didn't have internet in 1988, 89. That was our smartphone. That was our, but not so smart. You know, that was our way of connecting with people, or the telephone, or just going down to the mall. Which I didn't go to the mall because I didn't fit in anywhere, and I wanted to go to church, and I wanted, I was raised in Christianity, and I knew who God was, and I talked to Jesus, and I knew that what I was taught was that this is a sin and a grievous sin, and you're going to have to deal with this because you can't live like this. I remember going to my mom one day and asking her, I said, Mom, I was like 12 or 13. I said, is being gay a sin? And she just was like, oh, you need to see this. And she got out Romans 1 and 1 Corinthians 6 and Leviticus 18 and 20. We call those the clobber passages now. Um, and I didn't question it. Anything Mom said was true back then because I just trusted that she knew what she was talking about. So I had a major dilemma. For the first time in my life, I began to feel self-hatred on a level that I hadn't had before, because before that I was just like, I'm a freak, I'm weird, I don't get along with people, I'm not really a nerd, I'm just not fitting in anywhere. And now I'm probably going to hell, and I have a new problem on top of that. What am I going to do? So I carried that with me, like I said, until 1989. We're on the CB radio. We're fast forwarding here, um, talking to somebody, and it was a kid a couple years older than me that lived down the road, and we met up just to say hi. I just wanted to get to know who he was, and I had ulterior motives, of course. He did not. And I'm thinking, is the cycle going to repeat itself from last time? Well, no, because I have all this facial hair now. I can't hide it. I can't pretend to be a girl. So if anything happens, it's going to be because he wants it to, if anything ever does. And so about maybe 6 months to a year later, we had the conversation, and I said, I'm attracted kind of to you, and I know this is weird, and I don't want you to hate me for saying it, but and he said okay and agreed, and we began to see each other intimately, 19 late 1988, and we were together till 2003. It's about 15 years. Um, and that was an interesting relationship. It was more of a hookup, because I was not monogamous. I was all over the place. I was doing drugs, I was drinking, I was partying with my friends, and my friends knew I was out to two of my friends, but not to anybody else. And I would go to this person's house, for 15 years. That was, there was no going deep with me with emotions or getting to know somebody, because my heart was so walled up from the time I was little. Because when I'm 3 or 4 years old, I see my mom getting abused, I'm getting abused, my dad left. And so my thought on God at that time is, if you're real, 3 or 4 years old, you aren't helping me. And mom can't help me. She can't protect me. So I've got to protect myself, and I got to take care of myself. So I became very narcissistic, very egocentric. I was all about me, and I got to take care of mine. And I was terrible. I mean, I was literally beginning to live the life that's described in Romans 1, where their conscience was seared by a hot iron, and and that's where I was headed up till about 12, 13. And that's when mom told me about what she read to me Romans 1 and all that day. That was the time when I actually began to have a conscience that started to bother me. And I wasn't living the Romans 1 example anymore, but I did have a sexual um, attraction to men and not to women. So 1986, I was pretending, 1987, walking around the golf course we lived at in the middle of the night, dressed as a girl, trying to get attention from the security in the golf carts. And I got plenty of attention, but not the attention I needed. It's not good. And I had them all fooled. And then I meet this guy in late 88 where, and I'm going forward into the 90s. I'm in my 20s now. And I just numbed my pain with alcohol, marijuana, and then 94 meth. I mean, I spent all of 94 strung out on methamphetamine. I don't remember much of that year. Ended up moving to Hollywood, California, to where my dad lived in the end of 94 to get away from the drugs in Salem, Oregon. Go figure. That just sounds crazy, but that's how it was. And I got clean. I got sober over there. It was good. From the meth and the marijuana, I was still an alcoholic, raging alcoholic. But I got done. I was done with the meth. I finally got that kicked and came back to Salem, Oregon at the very end, right before Christmas of 94. And, just went forward with my life. I went to church a couple of times, and there was a group that was called Living Waters. And it was a program, it was an ex-gay program at the time that I went into. And it was basically, the worship leader who was very closeted, and this young guy my age that was 14 years sober from acting out sexually, but he dressed like, his mannerisms, everything about him. I'm looking at this guy going, I don't want to end up 14 years from now acting even more effeminate than I do now. I'm supposed to be getting cured. This needs to be fixed. This is not a good example. And it was basically me listening to cassette tapes. That was the ministry. But they were trying something new. It was 1995, 96. They didn't know what to do. And I couldn't go to the college and career group at church because I wasn't in college and didn't have a career. And I didn't have anything in common with these people. I felt like a total outcast. So what worked for me was the bar. The gay bar became my church. And that's where I began to establish community. And it was not healthy for me. There were things about that were not intrinsically bad at all, but there were also a lot of temptations. And with me, with my addictive personality and trying to numb this pain of every day thinking I am a vessel that God created for wrath. I'm just destined to be going to hell. I'll be lucky if I don't. So, living with that mindset, I was just, drinking I had a bar tab. I would drink my paycheck. I was working as a DJ, and I would owe him money at the end of the pay period after working a full week because of how much alcohol I was consuming and how much I was just giving away to people. And that turned violent. I just started destroying property and had a serious, serious drinking problem, very bad. I got arrested a few times and ended up with a DUI. And we moved to mom and I lived with my mom this whole time. I mean, off and on, I hang out at people's couches and stuff, but I was just living at home because I couldn't take care of myself. I couldn't function. I'd have a job for 3 or 4 months and then quit and get another. I had get this. I had 70 jobs between 1988 and year 2000. Wow. So I get this DUI. You think I've learned my lesson? No. We moved to Arizona for 1 year, and my parakeet gets out of this trailer we're living in, mom and I, and we were next to the water treatment plant in Tucson. This was the year when they had a major encephalitis breakout in that area. And the birds were actually being affected by the mosquitoes, and the birds were getting affected. And I'll tell you how they put this together in a few minutes because it's really interesting. But this was the outcome of what happened when they finally pieced everything together. I climbed a tree to get my parakeet down and to grab it and bring it back in the trailer because I wasn't going to lose my bird. What I didn't realize is that when I was climbing the tree, I was stirring up mold spores. They were dried bird feces on the tree. And I was getting those spores, I was breathing them in, and it went to what's called valley fever. And I ended up with valley fever. So we moved back to Salem again, and I've got this flu I can't get rid of. It's like I know I was tested for HIV not too long before that, and I'm not sleeping around at that point. What's going on? Why am I feel like I'm sick constantly? And I have this terrible headache. I can't describe it. Well, it gets so bad that I'm throwing up from the pain, and I finally go to the ER. They take me in and they put me on Dilaudid, and they put me on so much that it knocked me out. Then they mixed it with some other stuff, some painkillers, and I woke up and I had 4 banana bags hanging next to my head. And they said, "We don't know what's wrong with you, but you are very sick. We're going to run tests." So for 2 weeks, they ran tests on me, and they brought in specialists after doctor. And they said, "You have what looks like meningitis, but this is nothing we've ever seen. We don't know what this is." And at some point, about 3 weeks into it, they're like, when I'm waking up from, because I'm coming in and out of it, they're like, "You are dying. We need to find out what's going on. Tell us where you've been the last 6 months." They finally asked me that question, and that's when they pieced it together. I told them I'd just come from the desert and what had happened, and they said, "Get Arizona on the phone." And Arizona said, "Do a spinal tap." And they did a spinal tap, and sure enough, it was fungal meningitis. It was one of the rarest forms. Coccococcidiomycosis was the name. I had to practice that a few times to get it down. Um, it was the rarest form. Salem, Oregon had never even seen it. Arizona knew what it was. And 3 spinal taps they took. Those were wonderful. It's like the epidural needle. Fun stuff. And, you know, that was a bit of a wake-up call for me. And I know that God was trying to get my attention through these things. Like, I'm destroying myself with this. I'm destroying myself with that. He had a plan for me the whole time, but I didn't understand it because in my head, I was a vessel created for wrath. And I was thinking, well, this is just going to take me out. No, it didn't. I started thinking, well, I need a loophole. I've got to find a way to keep from going to hell, but I can't change. So I'm going to go back to the transgender thing because I do hear a woman's voice in my head at times. So maybe that's her trying to get out. So I'm going to see if I'm going to get cleaned up. I'm going to put on some of my mom's makeup. And I did. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, hot dang, you are a good looking girl. I was like, man, I'm way better looking than I was when I was, 1986 when I was trying to do this, when I was 14. I'm 30 years old at that time. And I'm like, well, this is actually awesome. I'm just going to go this route, and I don't care what anybody thinks. And I'll have and the nice thing for the man that I was with for 15 years is that he was 90% heterosexual, 10% gay. I was the only man that he would consider even being with, but he was all about women. That was his thing. And so when I told him I wanted to be, that I could very easily transition to a female, he was super excited. So that was the affirmation I needed. And I'm like, I got a loophole. This is going to work out great. And I'm still an alcoholic meantime. I'm still drinking and, driving, which I'm so sorry. I'm so glad that I never hit anybody, but the alcohol was so detrimental for me. I came home one night, turned on the TV. I'm in drag. I've got my wig. I've got my makeup on. I'm in my girl's clothing. And I turned on the TV and I'm fairly buzzed, pretty drunk. And I won't mention the names, but there are famous ministers, television ministries, and some of them aren't even alive anymore. The ministers came on, and this is 2003, so it's been a while ago. And one of them says, "You looking at the TV, raise your hands." I'm like, okay. So I raise my hands. He goes, "Your life is about to change. God's got a plan for you. And I felt the presence of the Holy Spirit, which is something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. I remembered it from moments in the past when I had experienced that and wondered why I was even experiencing that if I'm just doomed anyway. There's a little glimmer of hope there. And I sobered up sitting on the couch and I'm going, okay, this is the power of God. This is a miracle. Something's up. So I go upstairs and I start talking to the Lord, and I am literally, I'm like, God, I'm so depressed. I'm an alcoholic. I don't know if I'm a man, if I'm a woman, if I'm gay, if I'm supposed to be straight. I don't know. I said, Lord, you're going to have to do something because I want to end my life if things don't turn around completely. And an audible voice, you are my child. And I went, what? No, 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 no. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear, am I a man? Am I a woman? Am I gay? Am I bisexual? Am I straight? What am I? And that's all he said was, you're my child. And I'm like, oh, great. Well, I heard from him and he must not hate me. He hasn't killed me yet. So I started listening to the Bible on tape. I turned off the soap operas I was watching. I started straying farther away from the bar scene, and I started looking for a church. And this was the journey I started going on. And as time went on, I was able to kick cigarettes, which was very hard. Um, I still hadn't completely kicked alcohol, but it was getting easier. And I did find a couple of little churches that I liked, but they didn't know anything about me. And I was okay with that. So I'm just trying to get my bearings. What do I do? Because I'm still attracted to men and I still feel kind of girly at times. What the heck am I going to do? And my friend in Kaiser had me come to a small church over there. And that's where I met who would be my future wife. And in 2004, September of '04, I met her. And our meeting was quite humorous. She's sitting at a table during a potluck with a bunch of people. And I go, I don't know anybody except my friend that invited me. And I just walk over and sit by myself. And she yells, and her personality is like that. She yells across the thing, hey, you don't have to sit by yourself. And she doesn't know who I am. So I go and sit next to her. And I find out later she was thinking to herself, I didn't mean sit next to me. So we met and we talked, I said, let's go on a date. We went on a date and I puked everything up. I just, bleh. Here's my life. Here's where I've been for the past 20 years. These are all the things I've done. And I'm thinking, if she sticks around, this is going to be a miracle. And then she tells me some about her life. Not nearly as like mine. And I said, well, let's keep in touch. And I'm thinking, if this woman is okay for me, if this is the right thing, I've got to go for this and just trust that God's going to change everything. He's going to fix it. It's going to be awesome. And she heard from the Lord. The Lord said, marry him. And she'll tell you to this day, she was like, this guy is a jerk. He's self-centered. He's not considerate. He's obnoxious. And I don't like him. God's like, marry him. She's like, ugh. So we didn't get along the greatest from day one. I felt like she was constantly trying to change me. She's like, hey, comb your hair different. You're chewing your food too loud and stuff. And I'd be like, leave me alone. And the weirdest thing happened. We courted for 6 months. And I felt physical attraction. I can't explain it. For 6 months. On our wedding day, nothing. That was 2005. 20 years later, we're still together. Still nothing. And both of us felt like we had the rug ripped down under our feet that day. We both just were like, what happened? And I think a lot of it is that mindset of you can't have it. You want it because you can't have it. For me, because we stayed pure for 6 months and being told I couldn't have something Might have been a psychological thing. I don't know. So we've had a rough time. We ended up, though, having two wonderful children. Um, it was a miracle that happened. Um, one is going to be 18 in a few days, and one just turned 19. So kudos to them for sticking it out with us, because their mom and I are definitely have some issues, but we managed to make it work. And I had to start looking online and finding out what exactly kind of a marriage am I in. It's a mixed orientation marriage, and I get it. It used to be a lavender marriage back in the 40s and 50s in Hollywood. Um, and we didn't get married to be in a mixed orientation. We got married because we thought everything was going to be fine. Well, we both did not get what we expected. Um, so I'm almost done here, and you guys can ask questions or whatever. I'm just going to jump to the end, close to the end here. So what happened to me in 2015, I heard the Lord again, like I did in 2003. And I was packing up some equipment from our church. We were renting a hotel, and we had to pack up our stuff and move it every Sunday. I was packing up some cables because I was in charge of the audio and things of such. And I, 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 I began to think about how hard this must have been on God to have to deal with me and chase me around and fix things and keep me from danger over and over, and to keep me from getting HIV and AIDS. I mean, just miracle after miracle. And I said, Lord, I am so sorry that I've put you through this. Here's that voice again. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. My heart broke because I am seeing a loving Savior that's kind and gentle to me. And I'm hearing about this angry God that's going to come in the end times, and he's going to send Jesus to destroy everything and everyone, and there's going to be blood up to the bridles of the horses, and God is angry at these people for this, and look at all of the Old Testament, and but I'm going, but my experience with Jesus, no, it's not, it doesn't make sense. And that's when I started studying. It's when I started studying first century culture, when I started studying more Hebrew and more Greek. And I even started studying Greek mythology and the origins of where the Bible comes up with the word hell and the idea of hell, and how old is that, and how far back does that go, and what did Leviticus 18, what was going on at that time, and read everything in context, and even Romans 1. And I read Romans 1 again, and I was surprised. I go, I haven't forsaken God, even though I knew him, and gone after the creatures in lustful things and degraded my body and been mentally off. This isn't me. That doesn't describe me. I love the Lord. I'm in church. I'm serving with my life. So what am I going to do about this? I'm going to continue to study. And so we're going to fast forward to last year. I'm almost done, I swear.
No rush at all.
Okay, so last year, I had a massive nervous breakdown. I had been suicidal since 2016. And in 2024, my family was so tired of my mood swings and my outbursts, because I've been doing it for 20 years of marriage. I was so moody and so angry. And someone suggested that I might be bipolar. So I went and saw a couple of psychiatrists, and talking to you for 10 minutes. Oh yeah, you've got the symptoms. We'll put you on some meds. So I'm like, okay, to my family, look, I'm going to go on some meds. This is going to help. No, no, misdiagnosed. It was PTSD and ADD together. It looks like bipolar. And I had just been going through, in my counseling sessions, I had been going through dealing with all this childhood trauma, bringing it up, talking about it. crying. I spent a whole bunch of the end of 2023 just sitting in the garage crying, and I couldn't figure out why I was crying so much. I thought, well, this is probably part of the healing journey. So I have this major breakdown in 24. I spend 8 months of the year sitting in a chair with a blanket over my head, shaking. My right hand was shaking constantly. They're trying different meds. Well, this didn't work. Well, this didn't work. Oh, and then I get a new shrink. Oh, well, this didn't work. Well, now they've left. My counselor ends up leaving the clinic she's at because she's done with her school. She's finished and she's going to go start actually doing it professionally in a clinic with other people. She's going to join a firm or whatever it's called. Um, and she thinks it's only going to be 2 weeks. Well, that was August of 24 when my counseling ended abruptly, and it didn't start again until about a month and a half, 2 months ago. So I was without counseling. I was crying my eyes out. I was on the wrong medication. And then my mind it said, overload, can't take anymore. And I'm driving to Portland. I get all the way to Woodburn. I'm almost to Portland, or halfway to Portland, and I have a tremendous weight that hits me. I am so scared. I am afraid of cars. I'm afraid of my steering wheel. I'm afraid of sunlight. I'm telling you, I was afraid of my shadow. It was fear on a level I've never experienced, and I had no logical reason for it. I pulled the car over and called my wife and said, I need to come home. Something's wrong, but I need to get home, and this is going to be horrible, but I don't know if I can get home. I don't know if I can drive myself. And I took the back roads home, less traffic, and I couldn't go over 45 because it scared me. I had people mad at me going around me. I get home, and I'm having this terrible breakdown, and I am only able to watch one thing on TV. That's there's a channel that's on one of the TV networks that just plays scripture and nature in the background and light piano music. That was all and I had to have it low. People in my family for 8 months lost the living room. That became my sanctuary. And the only time I was really happy was when I was asleep. When I would go, I would look forward, I'd watch the clock and go, only an hour till I can take my hydroxyzine and go to bed. Because when I go to bed, my dreams are normal. I'm functional again. I am me, and I can do anything. And I'm, how we are in our dreams. We're all 20 years old again and in perfect health and perfectly fit. No. And then I would wake up and I would say, oh God, I've got to go through another day. I can't do this. I don't want to be awake. And I would be shaking. The rain hitting the roof was scaring me. Every little noise, and I jumped. I would scream because my nerves were so raw. So I thought, well, why don't I just get in my car and go find an empty garage somewhere, start the engine, roll the windows down, and be done. But don't do it here. I don't want anybody in my house to find me. That's when I knew I had a serious problem. And I actually told my mom and my wife, and they said, you're going to the hospital. So I went to the ER. They said, we don't really deal with mental health stuff. Here's a Valium, go home. Well, the Valium actually took the edge off. I mean, I felt pretty good for a couple hours, but then it started creeping back, and I could feel something physically in my chest tighten up when fear would come in waves. It was physically, emotionally, and mentally affecting me. And I was praying constantly. I was begging God. I had the pastors come, the elders come from one of the churches and pray for me, and I got better. I seemed to do better after that, but it wasn't fixing the problem. And I'm telling my psychiatrist, because I have to go see him once a week, because we got to find the right medication. And he puts me on a few things. I said, will you just put me on what I was on in the 90s? It worked. Well, he finally got around to doing that. And within a week, I started pulling out of all of this. I finally got one that worked. It's just a simple, mild antidepressant. No big deal. And my brain started working again like it was. It wasn't exhausted. And I started to actually be able to function. I could drive my car again. I could watch TV again. I could leave the living room. It was like, oh my gosh. Okay, so within a couple of months, I am starting to notice this change in me. And I realize I can't go back to where I was. Where I was killing me. Something's wrong. And that's when I stumbled upon a movie, 1946, the year, the mistranslation, and that was beyond eye opening. I thought, well, someone's going to debunk that. Let me look at a few more. And then I watched Pray Away because spent 2 years in a restoration ministry. I won't say it's ex-gay. I won't call it reparative or conversion therapy. They're actually really nice people up there, and they told me straight up when my wife and I went for the 2-year program back in 2007 to 2009. They basically said, we're not here to convert people. You're probably not going to, we're not going to promise you're going to be straight. You're just going to kind of learn how to deal with it. And I was not happy, but I finished the program. So that whole thing wasn't working. And so I watched the movie, and then I watched Pray Away for people that have been through conversion therapy. And there was, lo and behold, somebody that I physically knew from up in Portland that was one of the people that was speaking back in 2007, who is a fairly famous, I won't mention his name, but he's a very prominent face in the ex-gay movement going way back, decades. And he was there that day. And when I watched that movie from 2021 called Pray Away, I realized this isn't working. This hasn't worked. It's caused more damage than good for most people that I know. And I realized this isn't going to change. What in the heck is going on here? Anyway, more studying, learning about first century culture, pedestry, dominance over slaves and over young boys. And that's why, ironically, it's always speaking about men in the Bible and roles in that type of thing. You don't really read much about the women. It all began to make sense to me that I'm okay. I'm okay being me, authentically me. But now there's a backlash because everything I know, everything I've been told, everyone in my life says differently. So I deconstructed my faith. I went back and started over Jesus Christ as my foundation. And where I've landed in the last probably 3 or 4 months is that I am essentially same-sex attracted. I'm a Christian, and I'm married to a woman. I'm in a mixed orientation marriage. I love the Lord. I serve at church. But I can also feel free to dance around the kitchen and be goofy and not feel like I'm being judged or I'm weird because because I'm not doing what everybody else at the church, the guys at church do. They go out shooting and hunting and, throwing axes and have these man things all the time. They're having these conferences for men, and I don't want to go to them. I've been to them. And I even won a gun one time they were giving away, and I ended up leaving before I got it. Thank you, Lord, because if I had had that, I might have shot myself back when I wasn't in a good place. God's looking out for me. So, yeah, I also noticed that there are other people in my life over the years that have tried to reach out to me that I've rejected because I can't be a Christian and be in the gay scene at all. I can't be gay and be a Christian. Neither can you. So I am reaching out to those people again now and saying, let's talk. I want to know how your relationship with God is. I am not trying to change anything. My job is not to try to change anybody, even to what I believe now. But I don't want someone to be in a place of suicide. I don't want someone to be in a place of hopelessness. I don't want someone else to have to spend 40 years of their lives hating themselves and being 53 before they figure it out and wondering where all the years went. So what I'm doing now is finding ways to help, getting to know, first of all, people around me in my community, my church community, that I know are either closeted or struggling. Um, and then people online, people in my own family that are gay, that I've reached out to, that I had been very, very preachy and not willing to listen years ago. And so that's where I am now. I have talked to my wife about my attraction. She knows that things haven't changed and they're not probably not going to. I've talked to my kids about it, and I've talked to a couple of people at church. So I'm not hiding things. I'm not sleeping around. I'm not having affairs. I'm not hooking up. I'm not having an open marriage in my mind and not telling anybody any of that stuff. I do have a really good friend that I met, who lives in Florida, and he's a worship leader for a church that I was watching a church service over there. And he and I are working on music now, and we're writing music together. We have a similar story. He's got a couple of books out, and I just helped him edit and finish the audiobook version of one of them. And his story is powerful. It's a lot like mine, a lot like mine. So that's where we are today. And I'll stop here.
Wow. Well, it's been such a journey. Thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
So, do you feel like you're at the place now where do you believe and support gay marriage?
Well, that was one of the things that I deconstructed. And marriage, first of all, when the church talks about um, biblical marriage, it doesn't make sense. Straight up. I mean, one man, one woman. Well, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, biologically, the parts work together. You make children come from that. It's exactly how I believe God created it to work. Absolutely. Then why, if that's biblical marriage, what was all the polygamy that happened? Why did these people, why did David and Solomon and all these people have more than one wife if it's one man, one woman? Now, well, God never told them to do that. He also didn't say, thou shalt not. And we don't read that in the commandments that you won't have more than one. It was population. They needed to populate the earth. They wanted to carry on their name. Things change over time. And the Bible definition of marriage doesn't even make sense. The Bible definition of a man will leave his wife, or I'm sorry, leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife makes sense to procreate. And he may take on several wives to procreate. I get it. Marriage in itself, that whole term isn't really even I don't even see it in the Old Testament. I don't see it in the New Testament. I see people that, they consummate their marriage, call it a marriage. They consummate the relationship. They may sign a piece of paper. Okay, that's marriage. Great. So as far as gay marriage today, I don't think that gay marriage was God's original plan. I think we were designed a certain way. I also don't think, and this is going to irritate somebody, I just know, but I also don't think that a Twinkie was God's original plan for food either. But things change. People all, not everything is exactly how it was supposed to be. There are some people that are born with both genders. There are some people that are born physically disabled, and then there are eunuchs. You got the Bible's full of eunuchs, and the story of the eunuch that's riding in the chariot, and he's like, I wish I knew what I was supposed to, I want to learn more about this Bible. And the prophet sees him and says, hey, you want to get baptized? Yes, I want to get baptized. This was a eunuch. This was a story of a wonderful, godly person that had been castrated. Okay, so now we start talking about, was this person non-binary at this point? There's so much fluidity to this, but when we have our lenses of dogma on, and we approach the Bible from our perspective and have to make it fit our perspective versus looking at just the information and making a logical decision, it changes everything. And that's, you're cherry picking, and I've done it myself. You read things out of context, you cherry pick. We negotiate with the word constantly, because if we didn't and we took it literally, I would be stoning my kids to death at the end of the street because of them sassing back, and I am in trouble for wearing two types of fabric together. You know, you can't take it all literally. That's why you got to be able to rightly divide. So gay marriage, I really don't see. I don't see a problem. I don't see a problem with that, based on what I know, not based on dogma. So
Cool. Well, now it's really interesting to me. You said like for a long time, like people were reaching out to you they were gay Christians who were reaching out to you, or who were they?
those are my family members for the most part. I've cut my cousins, two of them. Well, one of them has been pretty upset with me for a long time, and she doesn't. She's. I doubt she'll ever come around, and that's okay. She's just. That's just her personality. It's men in general, and it's not just on me. So, but the other one has just been. She has shown more of godly good fruit in her life without even being a Christian. By label, I guess. Um, Whatever she believes, she's spiritual. I know that. She's had been more of a godly example than I was to people. And, I regret the way that I've talked to people. And there are even young people years ago that I was, saying the same thing that I was parroting and regurgitating what I'd been told. You can't live like that. You can't, I'd find someone that was effeminate acting at work and I'd be like, hey, are you struggling with this? Because if you are, you can't, God said. And I'd run into that same person years later and they'd be like, do you have any idea how much harm you caused me by telling me
Wow.
that? And you know where they found me? They found me in a gay bar. Hypocrite. So, yeah, I made some mistakes along the way because I really thought I was doing the right thing. And there are a lot of people that are in ex-gay ministries or Exodus or one of those things that, if you've watched some of their videos, yeah, the same thing. We tried, this fake it till you make it nonsense. It doesn't work. Sorry. I think that if people want to go into conversion therapy, if you choose to do that, there should be something like a Surgeon General's warning, like on cigarettes. They need to have a warning, a disclaimer on there. Hey, warning, this could be very hazardous to your health. 90% of the people that I've met that went through that never changed. And the ones that have changed say, well, I still struggle, but it's not that bad. We just stuff it down.
Yeah. Now, at what point did you, because so with regard to detransitioning, oh, I wanted to ask, were you only socially transitioning? Because, I know now, I mean, it was less common back then, but a lot of people take hormones and that kind of
I was
thing.
I was right at the doors of that. I actually had gone to visit the psychiatrist, and you have to meet a certain amount of times before they would give you hormones in 2003. Um, I met with that person a few times, and then my insurance suddenly said, we're not going to cover this. So he had to cut me loose, and I had no way to pay for it. And um, I was feeling a little bit hopeless. Like, what do I do? And that was, um, but I had looked into the operation. Um, People in the gay community were telling me to go to Thailand at the time. They did the best operations. I'm like, how am I going to pay for this? I remember my mom coming to me saying, I am not going to pay for this, and I will not support you getting surgery. She had tolerated a lot in her mind. Tolerated a lot of what was going on with me. Wasn't happy about it, but that was where she drew the line, and rightly so, because it would not have been for me the right thing. Because I was not, my reasoning was a loophole. and to just try to, again, please everybody around me. I got to make God happy. I got to make my family happy, which they won't be real happy, but this is better than going to hell. And, my ex at the time would have been elated with that operation. So yeah, it was,
Wow.
it was a mess.
Okay, so for you, did you like a lot of people have the idea that, you know, as far as like God is concerned, like people who are in very conservative environments tend to think transgender is like equal in, basically negativity as being gay.
Right.
So, how did you see it as a loophole? Like, did you not have any like conservative influence in that direction?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In my mind, trans was fine. Gay was not. Because at least if I'm transgendering, I'm sticking to the words on the book. The words on the book say to do this and don't do that. I'm going to take it literally. So, without any context or any historical background, it's ironic that one of the people that are right now that are pretty upset, not really, I shouldn't say upset, but they're very much against this, where I am right now, and what I've told him, has very long hair. And I was careful not to, but I wanted to say, well, what do you do with the scripture that says it's a shame for men to have long hair? And what do we do with the women that are preaching? They're speaking in church. Are you going to take Romans or First Corinthians 6 at that same level without studying out of context? Because the other stuff's fine. You've negotiated that away. What makes this different? Well, it's God's moral law. That doesn't change. Oh, okay. In that case, I can marry 6 women. It's not going to work. I'm not buying it. I've heard all the excuses because this truly makes people uncomfortable. This especially makes men uncomfortable. The idea, the mechanics of a gay relationship or trend, because to them it's called what's called the ick filter, or not filter, the ick um,
Factor.
factor. Thank you. I've said that wrong so many times. Anyway, program is, but yeah, it's that, and I get it. I can understand why that would bother them. I totally get it. But let I can't let my emotions or what I think. I mean, I think cilantro is disgusting and tastes like soap. The rest of my family puts it on their food. I can't hold something against somebody and say, I'm absolutely right and you're absolutely wrong and you are disgusting to me. Get away from me. I'm going to fight you on this just because I don't agree with them, because I find something repulsive. And I think a lot of the time that has been people's homophobia. I was one of the most homophobic people the last 40 years. I was so homophobic. I would make comments at the TV. Their commercial would come on. 2 women would kiss each other, and it would be for a medication or something. And I would just be like, "Oh, why am I having to watch this? Can't they take this?" Meantime, I've got other people around me. I have 2 teenagers that are trying to figure out who they are, and so should they ever, feel like they need to, they come up to a conclusion that if one of them says, I think I'm this or I'm not, they certainly won't be able to come to their dad or mom because they're going to feel like I can't come here. I'm going to be criticized and judged. And once I figured out what I was doing, I stopped and I apologized to my kids and said, look, if you're going through something, we'll work together. And this is where I am. And I told them where I am, and it was not comfortable. But they also know they can come to me with anything, and I'm not going to be judgmental towards them. And I've stopped acting like that because I'm actually not afraid of. I mean, I don't have the homophobia anymore. I don't have to put up the act. I don't have to, you know, pretend I'm super whatever. Hey, I'm super masculine and all this other nonsense that, I used to think I had to wear this mask.
Now you said are you still in the same church that you were in
No.
before? No. Okay. So what's your church like now? And is your church supportive of LGBTQ people?
So the church that I'm involved with now is, um, they're not really a denomination, but they are connected through a network. So I don't think it's a denomination, but it's just a network that kind of gives them some guidelines, and they help them financially, and they do the legal stuff for them, and they work together. So the 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 theology, or whatever you want to call it, their statement is one man, one woman. That's what marriage is, and that's what they will say if asked. I don't know what they personally believe. I know that I've been able to be frank with leadership. They had a series on First Corinthians last year, and they got to 6, and I had to get up and leave the room. I was getting so upset. That was back when I was crying all the time, and I was having my breakdown at the same time. Part of it, the beginning of it. And I finally told the associate pastor's wife, I said, "Look, I'm not attracted to women. I'm never going to be able to do this marital stuff the way they say. I can't be all this. I can't do all these things for my wife. I cannot fulfill this scripture." And I'm getting angry listening to this. And I was getting super emotional. And so, in a way, I guess I came out to her. I mean, they already knew stuff from my past, that I given my testimony many, many years before when I was in the ex-gay movement. So, yeah, I guess hopefully that answers your question. They're not
Yeah.
they're
Well,
not they're not a,
so
okay. Let me put it this way: they're inclusive but non-affirming. That would have
okay, I
summed it
think
up.
a lot of churches are, yeah. I'm
Absolutely.
sorry, we had a little bit of a delay. I
Sorry.
didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Um, there's a question here in the chat. So Risto says, what is the difference between trans care and conversion therapy? So I guess this is a kind of a popular idea that's coming out. Like basically, people have been very negative toward conversion therapy. Like you can't change a gay person, but now they're saying, but trans care is conversion therapy because you're trying to make,
Oh,
do you see what I'm saying?
I've
So,
never put that together before. Interesting. Yeah.
yeah. Now, and I want to just say to anybody watching, I am supportive of trans people. And I think for some people, it is the right thing for them to do to transition. I'm not going to tell anybody what the right thing is for them, but I have many trans friends that are very happy that they have made whatever transition, whether it just be, in appearance or hormonal or operation. But I also don't want to neglect that some people do regret making those kind of changes. And that's one
Mhm.
of the reasons I think Brandon's story and others are important, because a lot of people are in this place where they're trying to figure out who they are. And for Brandon and for many people, it's a repressed homophobia. They're actually not accepting themselves as a
Yeah.
gay person, and their escape for it is to like try to become the other gender. And so for you, Brandon, what do you want to say to people who like, are kind of trying to figure that out right now? Like,
Well, I guess I never thought about conversion therapy being uh, in, even involved in the trans conversation at all. But that's good to know. I have to be careful with that. You might want to call it reparative therapy at this point, because conversion therapy you know, sounds like what the question was about. No, um, it's trans transgendering is not the conversion therapy at all that I was talking about. I'm going to start using reparative, um, or ex-gay, but there are people that I have met that are either in the process or are transgender that seem to be doing very well. And I'm trying to think if I know anybody that regrets it. No, I don't know anybody that regrets it. But not to say that there's not. I would have regretted it if I had done it, but I had the wrong reason, in my opinion, for doing that. And that would have been a mess later. Come to find out what I know now, I would have said, why did I go through all this when I didn't need to? So I dodged a bullet for me, so to speak. But trans care, absolutely. Yeah, I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah. And so basically it may be the right thing for some people, it wasn't the right thing for you.
Right.
So someone here asked, is your marriage still intact? And I said yes. But how would you describe what you and your wife are going through now that, you know, have things changed more recently, like with the level of, openness, or what has taken place in your marriage recently?
Well, her and I have finally began to become actually good friends just in the last year or so. She's seeing the transformation in me. She's seeing the good fruit that's coming from my attitude, my behavior, uh, my decision making, just being a happy person for the first time ever, and not being so angry, and being wanting to be helpful, genuinely caring about what people are going through and not just making small talk, and not fighting and arguing with her, and not considering her a burden when she needs me to stay home with her because she's dealing with anxiety. She's going through her own process right now, and I believe it's going to end up in a deconstruct as well. But she is where I was right before I had my breakdown. And she's just started therapy, and she'll probably get some medication. I mean, I don't know if she's willing to do that or not. She doesn't really like any medication ever. But, I think she saw the change in me, and she saw the hell that I went through first, but she wants she wants something similar to what I have. Now, after watching, we haven't talked a whole lot about all the details that I've talked about in this video. So this this live stream is going to open up some conversation, and it might be uncomfortable for some people in my life, but I had to do this. Um, and I've been teaching her lately, and my daughter, who's been, trying to, I gotta take care of other people, and I gotta, do this for them. And I know that we've been raised in the church that says it's not about me. Sometimes you have to make it about you, or you can't do anything for anyone else. If you're not working, if your brain's not working, if you're broken, you can't help anyone, and you become a burden. I said, your mom, to my daughter, your mom is getting therapy. She's dealing with childhood stuff. She's going to deal with her marriage not being what she expected. And she's got a lot to work through, and we need to be supportive and be by her side. She never left my side during this. She could have left me 20 years ago. I had an affair, okay? I had an affair in 2008 while I was in reparative therapy in the program. Go figure, right? I still think that's ironic. Now, some of the stuff that they did there, I love those guys, I do, but having an all men's retreat at a beach house and having an open locker room where everybody showers together, and then you can walk off out in the sunset, and they say no twosies, take three or go by yourself. This is a recipe for disaster, and it was. Oh my gosh, I'm thinking, and I even brought it up to one of them. I said, is this really a good idea? Oh, don't question this. We do this every year. It's fine. Okay. All right. We're sleeping in the same rooms. We're seeing each other naked, and we're going to go walk on the beach. What could possibly go wrong? I know I'm being sarcastic. But usually I'm not this heavy with this. It's not this. I'm usually pretty fun. I have a good sense of humor. But anyway, I'm also ADD. So there you go again with squirrel. I just lost my train of thought. Um,
So have you like accepted yourself now as a gay person? Like, God is happy with you as a gay person, and are like, have you crossed that boundary, like where you feel fully comfortable with who you are?
100%. And you can give me whatever label people want to give me. That's fine. I don't consider myself someone who needs to wear on my on my sleeve, or something, or virtue signal as they call it, or tell people all the time, I'm gay, I'm gay. What my thing is, I'm a child of God. I'm a human being, and I just happen to be attracted to men and not women. And I don't hate myself anymore for thinking the way I do, for feeling the way I do. In fact, I looked in the mirror a couple of days ago, looked myself in the eye, and I said, "Good morning, gorgeous." And then I stood back and went, "What did I just say?" I really am starting to love who I am. Not just like, and not hate, but love who I am. And 40 years of hating myself, what a waste of time. But all things are for a purpose. And I do believe that God works all things together for good for those who love him. I really believe that that the impact that I can make the rest of my life, I don't want to say it was worth it, but at this point, I need to make it worth it to help others.
Well, and how do you think you can help others when you call up those gay people that you had previously said you can't be like that? What are you saying to them now?
I'm asking them how they're doing, and I'm telling them that I was way too preachy and too hard on them in the past, and it wasn't right. And I apologize for the way that I talked down to them, and by thinking that I was somehow supremely better because I was in church and you weren't. And that whole fundamentalist evangelical NAR mindset, that Christian nationalism that I came out of, the NAR's New Apostolic Reformation, it's the health and wealth gospel, the prosperity, name it, claim it. This is what I came out of, and in ministry and in religion and in church just in the last 20 years. This is something I had to walk away from. I am by far a progressive Christian. I am about liberation theology. Um, and I am so much better off for it in the people around me. And I can tell my cousin, I can tell my old friends, I made a mistake. And one of the hardest things I had to do is I had to get a hold of my ex and sit down and say, I screwed this up. When I left, I didn't even say goodbye. I did like the Bible says. I left my coat and I ran like Joseph did with Pharaoh's or with Potiphar's wife. I ran and I didn't say anything. And you deserve at least to have closure, to at least know what's going on. And I apologized for the years that I took advantage of him and treated even his family and his home disrespectfully. I mean, I was disrespectful to his mother. His mother never called me by my name in 15 years. I was always, what's his face? You know, she didn't like me. Well, she had every reason not to. I was a jerk. I was not a good friend. And but you know what? I don't stay there. I think about it. I apologize for it, and then I move forward. I am not staying in the past. I'm not going to stay in sadness. I used to look for escapes, ways to escape. Oh, I'm going to go back to 1984 where things were easier. So I'm going to put on that music and I'm just going to pretend I'm there. And I don't want to be there anymore. Those days for gay Christians were horrible. That was not a time to want to be around. Yeah, the church hating you, telling you they wish that you would all just get AIDS and die. We're talking mega churches on video, major names saying that. And then you've got, you know, the gay community didn't have a chance. They didn't have anybody looking out for them. And I don't want to be there. I'm so glad that we have progressed to where we are now. And I used to be afraid of this. You can't be where I am now. You're one of those lost people. You're one of those woke people that, you gave into your temptation. Really? Let me just say this. I'm on a medication that takes 90% of my sex drive away. I ain't motivated by temptation. That is not the case. What I am motivated by is good fruit. What gifts of the Spirit am I showing? Am I doing what Jesus himself said? Am I loving him with as much as I know how and treating people around me the same way I want to be treated? Am I helping the neglected, the marginalized, the poor, the needy, those who are hurting? Am I being the hands and feet of Jesus Christ? If I'm doing that, the rest is commentary. That's it. It's so easy. We make it so complicated.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you've seen the fruit in your life after accepting yourself and, seeing that God can work through you as you are, that, it's not something that you have to run from or hide from. So, this is a question that came in from Jamie. He said, "You have kids and a wife. So, I mean, what makes someone gay? Thoughts or actions?"
Well, for me, um, without going into a lot of details, I have children. I was able to physically have children, but I had to mentally take myself into fantasy to do it. And my wife figured that out pretty early on, and that ended intimacy. And I get it. And it's been a long time. But that was how I had the children. So thoughts or actions? Gosh, I'm really not sure. I guess it's going to be defined by the people around you. I mean, I don't know. Thoughts or actions. You can think gay thoughts. I know guys that think the thoughts, but they don't act on it. And I know other people that just have no problem acting on it. So I am not really sure how else to answer. It's both, I guess, for me.
Cool. And I like this question. Rista says, "What happens in the straight marriage when the attraction is gone? What percentage of marriages is that?"
Probably quite a bit as years go by. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I like this because, and this is one thing I do like about your story, is that, you haven't made that sexual intimacy what your marriage is about, right? Like, and I'm not denying that aspect of marriage, and I'm not even saying it's not important. But what I am saying is marriage is a lot more than that.
Mhm.
And if you're making a commitment to someone for life, you don't know what's going to happen the very next day.
In
You
our
could
case,
get
exactly.
you could get in a car accident and lose the ability for sexual intimacy or
Right.
something like this. You could
Hmm.
have something happen that makes sexuality impossible. And there's all kinds of situations. So marriage has to be more than, just this ability to have sexual, a good sexual relationship. And it has to be more than that, just attraction, because like Risto is saying, what happens when, attraction is gone? And I'm sure that happens. I don't know. I would only be able to guess about percentages, but I mean, there comes a point when, that can't be what your marriage is about.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that was really hard for me years ago when I had a much higher sex drive. When I was 36 in 2008, when I had the affair, um, it was a real problem. I mean, it was a real problem because that's just a part of your life that you know we all have, and needs weren't being met. and no fault of hers. This getting married on our wedding day and having the nothing, and going forward, we had to decide at that point: are we going to continue? Well, we have a baby on the way. Of course, we're going to continue. Oh, now we have another baby on the way. Well, of course, we're going to continue. I think the kids, for a long time, were a lot of the glue that held us together in our marriage until we could mature and get to our age now and be in our 50s and say, well, it's really not just about sex anyway. We actually get along for the first time just in the last 6 months or so, like friends. I can tease her, she can tease me. We don't get offended, we don't get hurt nearly as much. She can make comments that would normally I would consider a jab years ago, and I'm like, sticks and stones. You're not going to hurt me with your words, because I know who I am. I'm secure in who I am, and I know that I have amazing value, that all of us, every human being, has a special place in life that they are put here by God for, and they have such great value. We don't realize how valuable we are to God. At least I didn't. I'm still not. I'm still learning, you know.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your story so candidly
Mhm.
and all the things that you've been through and the bad choices that you made along the way, because a lot of people need to hear that, because God loves us and we are forgiven. So it's beautiful that God intervened and told you that you were his child in the midst of all these things that you were going through and all these things that you did. And so I really hope some people will hear this that may be struggling with whatever, maybe alcohol, maybe drugs, maybe trying to figure out what's going on with their sexual attraction, and just know that God is with you, God loves you. And for me and Brandon, the place that we have come to is that, well, at least I'll just speak for me. I believe it is a natural thing to be gay. Okay. That, yeah, maybe in the beginning, God created male and female, and that was his intention. But a lot of things have changed since the beginning. And
Yep.
now it is a very natural thing for someone to be gay. And we may not know the exact source of it, but it does seem to have a biological reality that is not changeable. And so we just want you to know that, God loves you as you are. You don't have to change yourself. And, you know, I encourage you to continue to study like Brandon did if you're coming from a conservative Christian environment where people are saying God does not ever accept a same sex relationship. Well, there's a lot of Christians who think differently. And so I came from the kind of churches that would say it is wrong to have a same sex relationship. But in my own study and years of prayer, I have come to believe that God does accept and love same-sex relationships, and that it's not wrong, it's not sinful. So that's one of the messages that's really important for me to share with people. Brandon, do you want to say anything else about that or anything else?
Uh, no, I'm just, I guess, just thankful that we got to have this broadcast, because I've wanted to say something for a while, and this is the first of hopefully more in the future with other people that will be helpful. And I'm hoping that somebody's encouraged today. I really am.
Me too. And if you watch this and you're encouraged, we would love for you to leave us a comment and let us know that this encouraged you. And also, I've put in the description of this video, if you want to hear, the Brandon has more videos about his experience on his YouTube channel. You can find his YouTube channel in the description of this video. You can also find helpful resources if you're a Christian who's like kind of trying to figure out where you stand, what you believe, and wrestling through same-sex attraction or anything related to LGBTQ issues. I've made other videos on this topic, and I've also linked resources that were helpful to me, like the Reformation Project,
Oh
Centerpiece,
yeah, love them.
and these are on Geeky Justin.
Hmm.
These are all
I like them.
people who and organizations who are supportive and working for LGBTQ affirmation in the church. So there's a lot of helpful resources available.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Geeky Justin. I was just watching one of his. Matthew Vines is another great one. That's Reformation Project. Or yeah, so that's no. I'm agreeing with you. There are quite a few, um, quite a few good resources out there. There really are, and I think the one that was the most helpful was watching 1946, the movie, and then I went and I did my studies on top of that to find out where Ed Oxford had got that information from Yale. I don't want to spoil the movie, but anyway, yeah, there are some things that were only uncovered a few years ago that we didn't know about that really, really affect things. So do your homework, people. Please do your homework. That's all I can say.
yeah, and for those Christians who are watching this and saying, no, they're wrong. This is wrong. God doesn't approve. It's clear what the Bible says. Well, we are trying to be consistent in our interpretation of the Bible. And Brandon mentioned it before, where some people are not being consistent in their interpretation of the Bible because they'll take a few things. The Bible says very little about same sex sexual relations, and it says absolutely nothing about the experience of lifelong same-sex attraction, being gay, that kind of thing. It says nothing about that. It says nothing about being transgender. And so we have to think and not just take a few references, negative references to same-sex relations, and then apply that across a broad, basically misapply it where it was never intended to be applied. And then with other verses, we don't take the same interpretation. What I mean is, he mentioned the long hair passage about men. There's lots that is specifically said that we should do in the New Testament that Christians have no problem ignoring right now. Right. So we have no problem recognizing that those instructions had a cultural interpretation, a
Yes,
cultural element to them. And so in applying our own principles in our own culture. Anyway, we could go on and on about that. But thank you so much, Brandon, for coming on.
yeah,
And yeah, so appreciate everyone watching. God bless you guys, and may the Lord be with you and guide you by his Spirit.
absolutely. Thank you.